Welcome to today's episode of the Support Insights podcast. I'm your host, Bryony Mulcairn, Community Manager at Centisum. Today, my guest is Tony Adams, Product Manager at Supercell. We're going to be talking about player experience in the gaming industry. If you're interested in knowing more about player support or you're in the gaming industry, Tony's going to be giving his advice on the best ways to level up your PX. Hello, Tony. Thanks very much for joining me. It's lovely to have you.
Hi, Bryony. It's a pleasure to be with you, and thanks for having me over.
No problem at all. So would you mind giving me a little bit of an introduction on you and your role at Supercell?
So I am a product manager at Supercell. I work in the PX department, and the product is actually all our PX technology, and PX being a branch of CX. So if you're familiar with CX, you know a little bit about PX. Before that, I was in Epic Games, Riot Games. I don't know how far back you want me to go.
That's absolutely fine. So your job title is product manager, but within the PX team. So that's obviously because you just said PX is a product itself.
The technology is a product as a whole. So if you consider it a product, that means I have all the characteristics of a product. It has a cycle, a life cycle, has releases, it has users, it has adoption, has success criteria. It's not just you throw tools for people to use like a toolbox. Right now, it's a platform where process people and technology have to create a player experience.
That sounds great. I know that obviously player support looks completely different to customer support in a lot of industries. So today we are going to be zoning in on that PX in the gaming industries. So really excited to hear everything you're going to say. Could you tell me a little bit about what the process actually looks like for a gamer playing a Supercell game who needs to get support?
Sure. There are several ways. The most common way by far and the most practical one is in the game itself. So Supercell has 5 live games and has a few beta games floating around. Clash of Clans, Clash Royale, Brawl Stars, Heyday, and Boom Beach. And in all those, you go in and play the game and you have a little gear button, which is called settings, where you can set up different things and connect your account. And there's a button inside of the settings called help and support. Once you click that, you go into the PX realm, right? Where you can look at articles, self-help, interact with some bots, chatbots, and reach out to our team of agents. We have about 1,500 agents and leads and specialists scattered around the world in 13 or 14 different languages, ready to help our players. So the player basically clicks on those, and if an article makes sense, they can use that. If not, they can contact and they navigate a couple of bots that can solve several issues. They solve about half the issues, the bots do. But if not, if the bot gives up, or if you meet a certain criteria, reach a human immediately, and you chat to them and say, this is what I want, this is my problem. Agent solves it or not, and you're satisfied or not, and then you just exit, and you're back in the game. There are other channels. You can contact us through our website, but then we don't know who you are, so we can ask questions. For example, if you go in as a parent and saying, I want to know if this game like Heyday, which is this game, is suitable for, I don't know, under 12s, right? And you'll get an answer there. And the other one is an email. There's some email support, which is very minor. It's for legal inquiries and things like that. So all those go to the same team.
That's fantastic. And yeah, if you're watching on video, you'll be able to see that Tony is in Heyday at the moment in a meeting room.
Inside the game.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go and try it out after this session. But that sounds amazing. So the whole idea being that players don't need to leave the game in order to go and get help and support. So that helps them in not interrupting their play. But is that also helpful for you because you've got their login details and all things like that already there?
Yes, it's super helpful because as it's inside the app, any Android or iPhone app takes information on your metadata, for example, your device, your battery level, basic information of the usage of the app. And we can use that to identify if it's you or not and saying, okay, it looks like you've deleted something or logged something out, but it's still you. So we can easily help you. So for us, actually, if you reach out on the web or an email and you want to do anything that's related to your identity, for example, refund a transaction. So to identify that it's actually you go into the app and saying, oh, it is you. Yeah, I'll refund this transaction then, right? So it helps with identity. It helps with usage. And you can get lots of metadata on what the player was doing before that. So for example, if the player made 2 purchases and joins you and said, hey, it costs twice as much, and you say, that looks like a duplicate transaction. Rather than going in and saying, send me your transaction, send me your receipt, send me this, we've probably got that information internally. So it helps a bit.
That makes a lot of sense. I did an episode previously with Craig Stoss from Partner Hero all about the data that exists that companies have on people, but they're not able to harness. So it just adds barriers to success having to do this back and
Yeah.
forth. You send me this, and the customer's like, but you have this information, you just don't have a way to have it presently at the moment when I'm asking for support. So you have been able to do that in PX.
Yes.
So with support being part of the game, how does that then work when you're trying to sort of liaise with the product team on the game itself when players are encountering issues, or just trying to work together to make that process seamless?
It is very difficult regardless of how you do it. I think it's what works best at Supercell, in my opinion, based on how other game companies do it. What you have is what you call a game champion, which is basically, it's like the equivalent role as a play support manager, but they are like a product support manager. So basically you have one for Clash of Clans. He works inside of the PX department, but this person works full time inside the game. So what they do is they come to PX, they're part of the team. They define this is the experience I want to give to the support to the players. This is how fast we need to be. This is the answer. This is right. This is what good looks like. I come on behalf of the product to tell you this. Now I'll go back to the product and said, remember this thing that you released last week? Yes, players hate it. Look at this, right? So they have to carry back and forth. It's a very manual job because it's hard to do. You have to, for example, differentiate between a feature and a bug. Not only the players don't know a feature and a bug, they can call a connection issue a game bug, right? And the game developer is going to go do that's nothing to do with me. But not only the agent can't tell, the supervisor can't tell, I can't tell, the game champion can't tell. You take it to the developer, and the developer doesn't know. Is this a feature or is this a bug? Is it a feature that you don't like or you hate? Or is it a feature that sometimes works, sometimes doesn't? Or is it really a bug? So all that conversation is a lot of nuance. So we have people that specialize on that, one for each game or one for clusters of games that are similar to each other. For example, beta games all go together, right? And that's how it's done. So these people have to be probably the super talented, and they are, in a way, the customer internally. So a game champion would come up to me saying, live chat has to be faster, or has to be cheaper, or it has to be more personalized, or it has to be less personalized, right? Or we have to emphasis on parental controls, emphasis on account security. Another one has an emphasis on payments, right? People barely buy this, but when they do, it has to be an awesome experience. So that's how it's basically done.
That makes total sense. You're having to constantly iterate because the nature of gaming is things are on demand. Things are fast. You want to log on, play your game, and have things happen and not encounter problems. Because if they do encounter problems, it's very easy to just log off and go and play something else. How do you then use that player experience to encourage loyalty in your players?
I'm glad you asked that. So it's a bit like what you said, right? It's like if a player tries to contact you because they want to spend $10 on something inside the game, right? And you don't give them that in the next 20 minutes, they're spending it on pizza. Your competitor is not really another game. The competitive Clash of Clans is not Genshin Impact. It's Netflix Pizza, Disney Channel, or whatever, right? So how to cause that loyalty is to try and find out what would get the player into the game faster. Sometimes they have to wait to get a more accurate answer. Sometimes you'd rather tell them, I don't have the answer, period, go away, right? I think I get back in the game quick. That is not easy to determine. So what has worked best in the past is to let the player determine. So we have, for example, first of all, we used to have priorities. This is more important than this. But it turns out that sometimes what is important for us is not important for the player and vice versa. So we removed all priorities, and now the player has a button. Do you want to leave us a message or chat live? And the player decides, for example, let's say they want a voucher, and the voucher is important because it's a present for the girlfriend if players ever get to have one, right? Which we rarely do. But let's say you do, right? And you want this voucher, you need it now before midnight because it's Valentine's Day, whatever, right? That is super urgent for that player. Although vouchers for us used to be the lowest priority because it takes 3 days to redeem anyway, but you want to give it, right? So you let the players decide what is urgent, what isn't, and then you wing it from there. Some players will abuse it. Sure, let them. Players abuse our games. They try and cheat. They try and win. They try and lose. They don't like losing. Everybody wants to win. You have millions of players. Not all of them can. So it's basically part of the same game dynamic. So basically, back to your original question is what would get the player into the game faster? A short, pleasant experience, a long, pleasant experience? Shall I give him more explanation and extend it or cut to the chase? Those are the questions that I don't have the answers for all games, for all agents, for all players everywhere. But I would tell you that letting the agent wing it and letting the player make up their mind, respecting that player agent workspace has worked best so far.
Yeah, I love that because that's a way of sort of treating everyone as an individual when they're gaming. Some people might be playing a game and they're really zoned in and they don't want to have to leave and wait for an answer because then they break their focus. So that enables you to be able to pick up on situations like this and help them immediately so that they can continue enjoying themselves.
Correct. And there's something else that connects to what you said at the beginning about information, right? We collect very little information about players, which which is good in a way because that means you let the player's behavior determine who they are. You don't let the player demographics. So we don't care about their age, their social status, their civil status, their nationality, everything. But this player plays a lot. It may be a 30-year-old that behaves like a 12-year-old, maybe a 12-year-old that behaves like a 20-year-old. And so that individuality is what works best than trying to constrain and categorize and saying, okay, this is what we expect a millennial to do. No, we have no idea what generation you are. We just know that you are really pissed off or you're really happy, and that's a predictor of the outcome.
What you just said is exactly why I find this topic so interesting, because that's completely different to so many other industries. You're making predictions on things like churn, things like customer sentiment, things like that, based on those demographics and those fixed behaviors. But it's so nuanced in gaming that you can't specifically say this 50-year-old is not going to be as invested in the game as this 18-year-old, because it might not be true.
Yeah, and it happened in League of Legends, for example, that the player was more categorizable. I just made up a word, maybe, by the character that you played in the game than by any other indicator, including spend. So, for example, if you were a fan of Teemo in League of Legends, your behavior inside the game is actually because you adopt personas, like being inside a film or being inside your favorite comic. So, do you believe you're Robocop or are you the corporate corrupt guy, right?
That makes sense. My partner's going through a bit of an obsession with World of Warcraft at the moment. And yeah, he's tried to convince me to go on and make a character before, and I just ended up making this big panda because I don't really care. But then he's trying to explain to me, no, but if you're this sort of warlock, I don't know if there is a warlock, then you can do this. And if you're this person, you can do this. And I'm like, I just like the panda. It's cute.
You want to
So
be a panda?
I wouldn't be your optimal audience for that loyalty and that fast support.
Of course, but you're a panda. You're a type of player that is a panda. And probably in a scatter plot of behavior versus spend or retention versus this, you're in a segment clustered with other players that are like you. They join to be with someone else they want to be, but they don't care about the game. So the way to support them is saying, I'll support them through, I don't know, create related accounts and saying, okay, they always play together. So I'll trust that they, I don't know, there's a sidekick.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great way of looking at it. So one thing we talked about when we had our last call was that a challenge in a way that you have is that the gaming industry is not a very mature industry and things are continuing to change and evolve all the time. So there's no script to say what good looks like. So how do you define that? How do you define what is good in PX?
As it's immature industry, it's hard. What works for one company might not work for another. I'll tell you what's worked for me in three different game companies that I've worked for directly, and what seems to be working in others that I have either colleagues that I work closely with or have consulted with, which is you map your success to the business success. And that is a little bit easier to get. So, for example, in the free-to-play game industry, the three core marketing processes are player acquisition, retention, and monetization. So let's say I need to capture 100,000 players a month. There's a 7% that's leaving. I need that to be 5% for the numbers to add up. And monetization is 10%, and each one gives me $20, and they give it to me once a month. But there's another group that gives you $5 three times a year, and this varies by region. All those marketing analytics are in common with all games. So once you've got your success criteria for the game, you have to map it to retention. And you have to map certain types of tickets, the response time with, for example, unlocking a payment or unlocking a refund, because if the player wants a refund, the faster you give it, the more likely they are to continue playing. So sometimes, for example, you don't really want the player to necessarily give you money. You want the money, yes, but you don't necessarily want the money because if they play a lot, they're engaging with the players that do give you money. So even the players that never give you a penny are essential for you. They're probably 99% or 97 or 95% of your players that don't give you a single penny, but they're in there engaging, getting game time, organizing plans, admiring how the others do show off the stuff that they buy in game. They shorten the matchmaking times. So those are the players that you have to protect. So that is part of acquisition and retention. So if you can map And there are several methodologies there. One I favor the most is the benefits management, a book by John Ward that he explains how to connect IT benefits to top investment goals. Your investment goals are protect the player, the brand, and the revenue, right? And that means a CSAT is a predictor of response time as a predictor of. In CX, you have quality, right? And quality is sometimes your grammar, your language level, and the choice of words, and the fact that you order your ideas properly is part of quality. In my experience, in PX, it doesn't. If you go, yo, hey, you stole my money. You mean the transaction? Yeah. You want your money back? Yeah. Sure, dude. Here you go. That is better, even though in CX, this is heresy, right? In PX, this is much more effective than actually saying, thank you for contacting support. Me, like you, I'm a player, I'm truly engaged, and it's an honor for me to help you today. Let me review the information and get back to you right away. This is a 12-year-old. Give me my money. Are you going to give it to me or not? Yeah, here's a go. High five, bye. See what I'm saying? So because you realize that increases those goals. And then you go to the other side of the dependencies, which, okay, what do I need to do that? I need to trade the edges in speed. Is typing speed important? Is typing accuracy important? Is the fact that they can read and write properly important? More important than they can actually feel the game and interpret the type of player. For example, oh, this is a panda, right? I just need to get out of the way. They don't want to really know more about the game.
Oh, I love talking to you, Tony. You question everything that I know about customer support because it is totally different in your world. It's so refreshing. So when we spoke last time, you spoke about 3 sort of barriers to customer experience or player experience in terms of how businesses are set up when they're trying to do well. You said that they were people, process, and technology. Would you mind giving me a little bit of an overview on why those things are barriers and what typically you do to have those things in a place where you can succeed?
Yeah. In PX, what you want is to make these 3 goals successful, and you've mapped your operations to that, and you've done your homework on the drawing board, and now you go into your real operations and you run into the industry, right? In some the older game companies, it's still called customer support, right? And customer success. You will see that they are picking up CX practices that are old and they apply them in PX. And you'll see, for example, that recruiting is still based on old profiles and not someone who's young and dynamic, but it's actually formal, and the appearance of education or the appearance of politeness is more important than actually saying, I need to fix this problem. You don't have to be nice particularly. You have to just be extremely focused on outcomes. The tools, all the technology in CX industry is fine-tuned for cost saving. If you talk to any AI engine, they will say, oh, we can deflect, we can auto tag, we can do all these things. Or everyone that sells you a chatbot, it means we can get rid of 75% of your customers. Saying, but what if I have to chat to them? I have to get them in the game quick. If getting the game is more important than cost per ticket, right? All this technology is for you is fine-tuned for someone else. So you have to retune it. Your skills, the skills that you gather when you hire, for example, hey, I want a QA lead. The QA lead comes in and they're going to come in with all these practices from the industry and present them to you, and you just go, okay, but we need to tear it apart and put it together again. It's going to look rather similar because the speed, accuracy, and compliance, and we don't want to mess up a legal threat or a GDPR request. It's the same as anywhere else, right? Because the laws don't change. But we really don't want to focus on things that are not contributing value. And this has contributed value for 30 years. Why is it going to stop now? I said, because it stopped added value, period. Ask the players. I don't know. Let them do a focus group with 13-year-olds if you dare, right? If you intend to come out alive with that one. But all I can tell you is that the player behaves better when you just get out of the way quick. So processes, lots of processes assume a deterministic nature of the player agent experience. Means if the agent does this, the player will be satisfied. This might work when you have to sell something normal, right? Or when you have to make an airline reservation in games and in mature industries. Here, it's not necessarily the case. So, for example, you have to improvise more. For example, your escalation criteria is much more important than the process adherence. I don't know what to do with this player. What the hell is a panda kind of player? I don't know what to do with that. So I'll have to contact someone else and ask them to wait. Are they willing to wait? No, they're not. I'll have to improvise this. There's no process for pandas, right? So you can't create them. So you have to create spaces for discretionary thinking in the process. You can describe it. When you have to compensate a player, do between 0 and this according to your judgment and what feels best. Play the game a couple of times a week and you'll figure out what feels best. And in this case, no, you can't do that. In this case, you can do that. So you put these enabling constraints around the processes. One of the biggest enemies I've found is flowcharts. Everybody loves flowcharts. right? The process creator loves flowcharts. They come from programming computers. So you presume the agent is a computer. So you say, okay, I have 1,000 agents. I can't train 1,000 people in common sense, critical thinking, player focus. I can't do that. Therefore, I will create a flowchart. Everybody has to follow it and get the QCs to make them feel extremely guilty if they don't. But the problem with the flowchart is that also agents love it because I follow the flowchart, not my fault. You go, dude, but I followed your flowchart and nobody's accountable anymore. But if the flowchart doesn't fit some of those players, you're going to not get them back in the game fast. So what you have to do is get rid of the flowchart, or we use the flowchart for the first 3 weeks of training, and then you have to make the ceremony of burning them all. And the agent has to start thinking. And when they're thinking, you're going to start finding interactions that work better than others. And there you have some, what you call in complexity, emergent practices, which you can't create your process for. There's a thing I've mentioned before, which is the Kanban framework, which divides things in ordered, which you know that if you do this, you do that. If you turn the switch on and the light comes on, right? But then you have the complex systems. Traffic, for example. When do I cross the road? Where do you have to look? I can't tell you when. You have to go there yourself and look. It's pretty easy, but still you have to go in there and look. And I think interacting with players is compared more to traffic than light switches. And flowcharts are fine-tuned for light switches, in my opinion. I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, it does. So you're giving your agents the freedom within a certain constraint to be able to assess the situation and say, this is what I feel is appropriate based on their experience and based on the player that they're interacting with.
Yes, and it's not easy because you have the whole industry opposing you. You have BPOs saying, we can't do that. I'm not hiring for that. I don't know how to train for that. So you have different people that the skill set of the people you hire or you interact with or you consult with is not fine-tuned for that. And you just have to say, okay, I have to walk people through a path to discover these spaces and to show cases of success and sell them and see, it does work. You can trust the agent sometimes for some things, right? But you can't tell exactly which. You have to explore, you have to interact, you have to experiment.
So do a lot of the staff at Supercell and at the BPO then, do they actively play your games so that they can be relatable to the players?
Game time used to be a big thing. I think it's sort of trended down and up, but all all the agents are encouraged to play the game. It's not an immediate recipe for success. If you rate the best agents and the worst agents, you find that at the top, some of the top talent haven't played the game at all. They're just very intuitive and they read the player well. So it's not a determinant of success. It's a predictor. So you should, for example, organize games, organize competitions, tournaments. But if somebody says, I don't like, for example, Heyday or whatever, or Brawl Stars, right? And I'm not going to play it, but I'll support it. And I can be pretty good at it. You might not be an expert in the game, or it'll be very hard for you to connect some things. But these are edge cases. What you do have to have is a good escalation criteria. So if I need someone who knows exactly what the Panda in World of Warcraft is or what the Teemo in League of Legends is, I have to know who to contact and saying, okay, you seem to be this, and you have to be able to pass it because you can't have 1,000 people that know everything about everything. You just have to say, I'll get you in touch to who does. So basically the norm is that a frontline agent should be able to solve 80 to 90% of issues in 50 minutes. If not, I'll find someone who will.
Oh, okay, interesting. Yeah, and that's obviously part of having a lot of individuals within your team. People are going to naturally be more skilled at other things, more intuitive at some things than others, and it just enables you to have everyone there so that you're set up best as possible to deal with whatever comes at you. So we mentioned that one thing about the gaming industry is that technology is constantly evolving. So you don't necessarily know what the gaming industry is going to look like in 5-10 years from now. It might all be completely different. So how do you set yourself up to be ready to iterate as things are moving and changing?
At last, an easy question. Basically focusing on capabilities instead of features. So for example, we're now changing how we manage asynchronous and live chat with different features in the tools, right? And that's going to change the agent experience. But what we have to do is that is irrelevant. It's going to solve the problem for the next 3 months. What I have to do is get the agents used to the fact that what they're using today might have nothing to do with what they're going to use in a year, 2 years, 3 years. So getting the agents used to change, for example, change management or change enablement is more important than what change you're doing exactly. So you can actually get something that uses AI, then it turns out that AI is actually distorting or not catching up, or it mistrained. So you have to be able to switch it off. And now agents, remember this AI was helping you? Yeah, not there anymore. Now I have to wing it. Oh dear, okay. Suddenly you discover this technology, it automates things amazingly well, right? And you integrate it, and the players are super happy with it. Suddenly the game changed, or the players graduated from school or whatever, and suddenly they don't like it anymore. You have to switch it off. Same with processes. So it's basically capabilities more than outcomes. Recruiting speed, right? Performance management. Your top performers might not be the top performers of the future. So you have to not just remove your low performers, but develop your low performers to be medium performers, because that's a skill that will enable to keep your skills rather than just remove them and hire them again, which is extremely disruptive, expensive, and not sustainable. Knowledge cycle. Knowledge cycle is what I said, right? You discover something, you surface it, you structure it, you deploy it, you start using it, and suddenly you deprecate it and you have to learn something more, right? That's your knowledge cycle. If you can do it, the fastest I've seen do it is 5 weeks. And I think 90% of the operations I've seen don't do it at all. That means the QC sees a trend, they give it to the team leads inform the trainers develop something, but you don't just close that loop and saying, did we solve the problem? And the fastest I've seen is 5 weeks. And the fastest I've been able to reduce it was 3 days by connecting two things. And that, for me, that's more important. So getting people used to change. So your developers have to be able to change things according to priorities. They have to be able to say, okay, we're changing this, we're removing this tool. Oh, we're putting it back again. No, we're removing that everything. Now we're going to change everything to this in a way that makes sense in this dependency model. If you remember that we're here to protect the brand revenue and player base, or assist as PX, we have to be part of the cycle, the process of acquisition, retention, monetization. If you remember that, the rest falls into place. So capability is how fast do you update your skills, or how fast do you learn something from your players and keep up with the technology that's in the game. The game has releases every 2 or 3 months. And if you have 5 games, that means you're having one game change every 2 weeks. How are you going to put 1,000 people through that? Well, training has to be micro training, has to be fast. If they don't like it, they can just downvote it. And if your training gets downvoted to the bottom, you just go, okay, that went well. And you have to make another one.
I love what you just said about being able to handle change is more important than predicting what the change is going to be. So you've given a lot of really good advice in this episode to other PX leaders in the gaming industry, but is there anything else that you would say to anyone in that industry who is looking to improve their player experience?
My advice is to view anybody that calls something a best practice, view it with suspicion. I've said it before, oppose it, just in principle, because it's probably emerged from the 50s in contact centers, which are based in the 50s. If you look at modern BPOs, they're a contact center. If you look at it, and if you look at call center from 1973, you look at the photograph, it hasn't changed at all, right? Because humans haven't changed much, but the technology has. And gaming isn't forgiving. Your players from 4 years ago, they were 13, now they're 17. Do you realize how much a 13 from a 17-year-old behaves? That's something you have to adapt to. So, for example, marketing comes in, oh, let's do the demographics. For example, let's have surveys on your website about the age and the gender and things like that. And you just go, no. But that's the best practice for UX. You're not having, you have to show me it helps my game, and then I'll let you implement it. If not, do a Gandalf. You shall not pass. That's my advice.
Okay, I love that. So anyone listening to the episode today who is a support leader in a different industry, you're probably thinking this is completely different to everything we usually talk about in our episodes, and you're absolutely right. But it is fantastic to hear about and learn about, and it sounds super exciting, everything that you guys are doing day to day, and you get to work in rooms that look like that. So it seems like you're having a great time.
Yes. And if anybody wants to reach out to me on LinkedIn and ask questions, follow up, or chat about it, or tell me what the hell are you doing over there? Are you crazy? Yeah, happy to follow up with anyone.
Well, thanks so much for joining me today, Tony. I've had a really good time hearing all about PX in the gaming industry, and I hope to chat to you again soon.
It's been a pleasure. See you next time.